All right, check, check, radio check. I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their schedule to hop on our weekly call. The one thing I want to, why am I talking about Ross early in the year? Typically, I talk about them at the end of the year. And it's because now is tax season, so a lot of us are getting our 1099s or W-2s, all that information. And as we're collecting it, we hand it to our accountants. And then they ultimately say, hey, you've paid this much, you get a refund. But we really, should be cognizant of, starting to plan. The rules are changing, the landscape's changing. And so if you don't understand the complexities that go along with conversions, not everybody should convert. There's reasons to, there's valid reasons not to. And I'm just going to take us through some of those conversations today. I've been through this before, but it doesn't ever get old to me. And that is, do you honestly believe income taxes in the future will be lower, the same, or higher? And I'm not going to poll you, but I am going to show you. I took this screenshot today. We've talked about it. And when we get off this call, you can go type this in usdebtclock.org and you can look at it real time. It's running real time. But the numbers I focus on are, the US national debt, 36 trillion. I mean, just in November, we were at 35 trillion. It is just creeping up. The interest on the debt that we owe is 5.1 trillion, yet we only have 5 trillion coming in from tax revenue. It again doesn't take a math major to understand that our country is on the wrong course. And so when you look at tax history and you see that the mean has been 57%, but right now our lower tax bracket, we're actually in a lower tax bracket. This is why I promote and start to say, hey, think about, Roth conversions. And we should be, strategic in our planning because it's not all or nothing. So that's really the purpose of the call today is considerations when converting IRAs to a Roth IRA. The cost of converting is immediate. This has always been the challenge, since, 2009, 2010, I would be talking to audiences and it really always this fundamental core philosophy, right? You must pay the taxes next year. And the question is, where does the money come from to pay the taxes? It almost never makes sense to cannibalize the account in an effort to cleanse the account. If you don't have the money elsewhere, then probably this is you'll just, better off holding on and seeing what the future brings. You cannot undo conversions. So there's no do-overs. And then so that brings us to the point. Do you have other non-taxable assets outside of the IRA to cover the tax costs? Will the amount converted be taxed at a lower rate now than it possibly would be in the future? And that's why I showed you the tax history. Quite probably the answer is yes. I mean, the government just, hopefully we'll get the fiscal house in order. But right now, just on the trajectory that we're going, we have to be proactive. And then will your RMDs be reduced enough? And that's where we have to sort of, look into the future and do a crystal ball and say, hey, what's it going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? And now that they've, Secure Act 2.0, and we start to see that we're going to be forced this imputed income at a time when maybe we're taxed at a higher amount. And this is all where the uncertainty comes in. Will the reduced RMDs help offset or negate any future tax bracket increases? Again, this is where you have to sort of look at it objectively and say, hey, this is where I think we are now, and I'll show you a sample of that here at the end. For couples, will converting leave the surviving spouse in a better tax or income position? And that is, obviously where planning comes in. And do you want to leave any money in a tax favored position for a non-spouse or beneficiary? So, those are the questions to consider. But, like all things, we're going to start with caution, right? So, if you're walking somewhere and you see that caution tape someplace, remember unintended consequence number one: adding extra income to your 1040 could trigger extra taxes and costs. You have to know that going into it. And so that's where a lot of times, people try and do this themselves without any guidance. You could inadvertently be handing yourself a huge tax bill. Medicare recipients could see an increase in premiums during future years, right? So that's something we've talked about before. You'll hear us talk about again. It's a nomenclature, or it's called IRMA, right? Income in respect to median relative income. So you have to understand that, in my opinion, this is where they get you. This is the gotcha. And then, that could also, depending on your portfolio, depending on whether you have a brokerage account, whether you're saying, hey, I built out a dividend strategy to live off of from my investments, and that was typically subject to capital gains. Well, now all of a sudden, we could be driving up some of those capital gain costs with that strategy. And it all has to be played out, and you have to sort of be, again, proactive with the thoughts there. This is, again, the stealth tax, right? So the income that could trigger a tax on the investment income is known as net investment tax, or 3.8%. Again, stealth tax. It's hidden, and it gets triggered typically, and when you're made aware of it, it's too late. You have to go into it knowingly. Clients receiving Social Security benefits, the extra income could be made more benefits taxable. And so that gets into a whole nother section of the tax code called provisional tax income, which in and of itself is complex. So all these factors, it's like, how do you make heads or tail of this? And it's, the answer is really simple, which is, dealing with somebody that understands these things to guide you through. And whether it's us, whether it's your accountant, CPA, we got to work together to make sure that what you're trying to achieve, that you're not somehow shooting yourself in the foot. Clients enrolled in the insurance exchange, Obamacare, extra income can cause repayment of tax credits. So here you are working and planning on, trying to get cost-effective health insurance, and maybe you qualify because of your status right now for, something on the health exchange, and next thing you know, that some of these conversions now bumped you, and you lost some of the credits you might have been entitled to. Did I mention it was complex? So, possible benefits of converting. RMDs may be reduced or no longer required for owners slash spouse. RMD stands for required minimum distributions. So that is that mandate. It used to be 70 and a half, and then Secure Act 1.0 came out and they changed it to 72. And now it's 73 with the Secure Act 2.0, and it's being deferred out to 75. So all these things that might look like, well, it doesn't bother me yet, or it doesn't affect me yet. What you're basically doing is by not being aware of it, not being proactive, you're kicking the can down the road to only have something happen that could now all of a sudden legislation where finally, somebody comes back and says, this is unsustainable. Let's change our tax rules. And now let's make it so that everything is now taxed higher. So we have to be careful of that. Medicare beneficiaries could see their premiums stabilize or decrease during future years. And that's why it's key. If we're active, and I'm going to show you, I just had a client on today. He just retired at 57. And he's got quite a bit of money in qualified plans. And it will be our goal over the next, 8 to 10 years to get, not all of it, but a lot of it cleansed. But remember, the IRMA testing, the means testing, this additional Medicare premium that you could be subject to for a period of time, they look back 2 years. And so when they look back on your income tax for 2 years to see what your income is, they could go back and say, well, because of that, you now have to pay this elevated tax or Medicare premium. Well, that may seem initially as a deal breaker, but you have to understand it's not perpetual, it's not forever. They will come back and say, you know what, after 2 years, it actually might have made more sense to cleanse the account from the tax risk versus an increased premium for a period of time. Spouse and non-spouse beneficiaries would receive the money tax-free. This is key. So if you are a spouse and you were to turn around and put your money into a Roth, and we are all are going to meet our maker someday. If that happened, right, while you're alive, once it's cleansed, all the growth on that money is tax-free. So that is a home run. But when we finally do, have our calling and we're no longer here, whatever's left in that account, if our spouse is still alive, can go to our spouse and they can transfer that into their Roth IRA and potentially continue to defer the income tax on that account as well. With non-spousal beneficiaries, children, nieces, nephews, right? If we were to turn around and leave them as the beneficiaries, then still income tax free, but there is a 10-year payout on that. So they must spend that account down by the end of the 10th year after the date of death of the account holder. So, there's just, to me, tax-free, it mitigates a lot of tax risk. I've talked about this for decades now, and the time is upon us, and we need to be proactive if we can. So income tax later will be taken tax-free, and it will help offset potential future tax rate. Like I said, take tax risks off the table. So you may have seen in the past that we have, and we're going to continue to make this offer. It doesn't, we're not going to ask you to go nuts. Let's just see, if this is something that you should consider, and what are the ramifications. Well, the first step is I have to understand your financial picture. So however old you are, take your picture of this QR code. This will give you access to Asset Map. Once I see that you've gone in and completed it, I'll reach out to you with my calendar and say, hey, let's get together and talk about. And then we can go through and start to build out a model that for you that you've seen. It's my tax what if calculator. So that at least we're exploring, hey, does this make sense? But this would be the first step in order for us to have a complete picture on what we're doing. But here's where, one of the calculators that is in my software is like I said, this client here today was 56. They're going to be 57 in a month. They're retired. They're blessed. They had more money than I showed here, but I want to keep the math simple. So right over here, they were 56 and they had $1 million, let's just say $1 million, and they're qualified. It could be an IRA, it could be a 403B, TSP, whatever it is, right? 401k. Growing at 6%. They didn't need the money. They're just turning around, let it grow. This number over here, that account will grow to $2.692 million based on this assumption. And they will be forced in the first year to take 101 and then the next year 107. And that's just on his account. She had one as well. So when you combine it, right? And I don't know what the tax rate's going to be in 15 years from now, but quite likely higher. And now let's just say that we're at a 50% tax bracket. So 50% of this money is going to the government because we just kicked the can down the road. To me, I just don't think in that the government is going to be as good a steward of our money as we are. So that's why I'm so passionate about it. Take us up on our offer. We're here to help. We're never going to pressure you. When doesn't it probably make sense? Well, if you're already into retirement, I would say, you know what? It's probably not as critical for you because remember, we still might have the 2-year look back. We'll certainly look at our tax what if. And we may be splitting hairs, right? Because remember, all of us get a standardized deduction, right? So maybe, and as we're older and both of us are age 65, that some of these things may not be as meaningful to somebody that is, starting to enter in. They've just, the kids are out of college. They've been banking their money, saving for retirement, and now they're transitioning. So this is why I want to just make sure that you're aware and be proactive versus reactive. So with that, hopefully that made sense. You found this time valuable. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedules, and I'll see you soon. Reach out with questions.